Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Diogenes, the Dog of Athens by Manly P. Hall, an article taken from The All-Seeing Eye, Volume 5, Number 1, October 1930. Diogenes, the Dog of Athens by Manly P. Hall. The gods are sufficient to themselves, therefore they are gods. Men are insufficient to themselves, therefore they are men. It follows that the more men depend upon others, the less they resemble the gods, and that they verge towards the divinities by detaching themselves from the concerns of mortals. Thus reasoned Diogenes. To be consistent, he decided to live no longer in a house that another man had built, to deny himself all pleasantries and not even use the commodities common to everyday life. Furthermore, reasoned the old skeptic, the gods, being complete in themselves, accepted nothing. So, with a flourish, Diogenes returned one after another the things that had been given him, until at last he was reduced to a state of abject poverty. In his estimation, this resembled somewhat the divine state, for no longer receiving anything, he was like the gods who accepted nothing of mankind, but who gave unceasingly of their life and light to all living things. So we find Diogenes living in a tub, an old discarded barrel that no one else would have. This he rolled into the Metrium, the public square where the Athenian senators, merchants, and populace congregated for one reason or another. Here, with a little straw on the bottom of his tub, Diogenes lived a considerable part of his life. While they heartily despised the old cynic, for he was the Bernard Shaw of his day, nevertheless the Athenians had a high respect for Diogenes. A number of schoolboys, for a prank, once bored holes in his tub, so that when it rained, the water poured in. The citizens were so stirred up by this outrage that they not only severely punished the boys, but also bought Diogenes a new tub, and insisted upon his accepting it in the name of the state. Though the wise old philosopher lived rejecting mankind, the mankind he scorned grew to be very fond of him and his eccentric ways. The self-styled wise and the pedant would gather around him to watch him and listen to his words, and when Diogenes did not edify them, he at least amused them. Diogenes was the recipient of the homage of Alexander the Great. The conqueror came one day and stood in front of the tub where the famous skeptic was sitting, sunning himself. After looking Diogenes over for some time, Alexander said, "Is there not something that I can do for you, something that I can give you, some way in which I can reveal to you how I admire the profundity of your thinking?" Diogenes looked at the young Macedonian for a few moments, then said, "Alexander, there is only one thing you can do for me. Step aside a little. You're between me and the sun, and I am cold." That was all that Diogenes would accept, namely that Alexander should step aside a little. So interested was Alexander at this reply that a deep friendship grew up between him and Diogenes, and these two men, both of remarkable wit and insight, would often play jokes upon each other. On one occasion, Alexander the Great sent a basket of bones to Diogenes. To appreciate the point of this particular joke, it must be noted that out of popular conceit there had sprung up a nickname for Diogenes. He was called the Dog of Athens, because in his own words, he barked at those who were untrue. He snarled and bit at those who were false to themselves and did all he could to bring discomfiture upon those who felt themselves to be in high positions. So, out of recognition of this nickname of the Dog, Alexander sent Diogenes the basket of bones, accompanied by a note which read thus: "From Alexander to Diogenes, greetings. These bones are such as a dog should receive." Patiently reading the note, Diogenes turned to the servant who had brought the basket and instructed him to take the bones back to Alexander with the following note: "Diogenes to Alexander, health." These bones might have been such as a dog should receive, but they were scarcely such as a king should send. Alexander so admired this retort that he caused it to be published among his people to show the wit and understanding of this great skeptic. Diogenes was a contemporary of Plato. These two men heartily despised each other, probably owing to the difference in their fundamental viewpoints, for sad as it may seem, the wise are sometimes domineering. It is very difficult, even for the great, always to show that rare humility which is the seed of true greatness. One day Diogenes, whose chief hatred for Plato was based upon the fact that he believed the great Athenian to be proud, chanced to see Plato walking down the street wearing a brand new long flowing velvet cape. Following Plato, Diogenes waited until the great Platonist was standing over a mud puddle, He then crept up behind Plato and, quickly jumping up and down on the hem of Plato's robe, trampled it in the mud, at the same time calling out loudly for the benefit of the bystanders, "Now I've stepped on Plato's pride." Plato, whose name was derived from plateau because of the breadth of his brow, was a shrewd Jupiterian and a jovial soul. Turning upon the irate Diogenes, he said with a smile, "Yes, Diogenes, you condemn my pride, yet how proud are you that you can step upon my cloak in this way?" Nonplussed, Diogenes thought for a moment, then crept away. The above instances are typical of the great cynic. Diogenes had a very curious mental twist, and his life was given over to many austerities. Many people believe that in order to be really good, you must be more or less uncomfortable, that a state of comfort and ease for the body may in some way lure the soul into sin. Diogenes shared such a belief and set himself the task of mastering his body by subjecting it to all sorts of discomfort and mental discipline. Consistent with this theory, we find him one day sitting on a snowbank with very little clothing, actually numb, and his teeth chattering from the cold. He had done this simply to prove his control over his body. A citizen of Lacedaemonia came by and, seeing the great cynic sitting in a snowbank, called out to him, "Diogenes, are you cold?" Diogenes looked scornfully at the youth. Certainly not," he replied, his teeth actually chattering. "All right," retorted the Lacedaemonian, "if you're not cold, why do you sit there?" With a sheepish expression upon his face, Diogenes got up quietly and retired to his tub. He had been bested by the stranger from out of town. Diogenes maintained the same general attitude of both the true Oriental and the early Christian ascetic. He devoted his life largely to the mastery of his body, to the mastery of every emotion, thought, and action, and as the result of his wonderful self-control, acquired a great profundity of reason and understanding. To show how he departed from worldliness and devoted his life to the study of abstract subjects, it is interesting to follow him as, leaving his tub and passing down the street, he would come to the small fountain from which he used to secure his drinking water. He carried in his hands a simple mug. We don't know whether it was pewter or clay, but it was an old and cheap vessel. As he leaned over to fill it, it suddenly occurred to him that the gods did not use cups when they drank. Hence, such things as drinking cups were definite evidences that he was still bound to mankind. So, with a gesture of impatience, Diogenes threw the cup away, breaking it in pieces and declaring that as the gods did not need cups, neither did a wise man, but that any man's hand was enough to form a hollow vessel from which to drink. From that time on, therefore, Diogenes did not use a cup. In his advancing years, Diogenes developed the habit of leaning upon a cane or staff. Suddenly realizing that the gods did not lean upon sticks, he threw his cane away. Even in his most advanced years, when he had become rather weak and decrepit, he refused any assistance from a stick, declaring that all these things were evidences that he had not yet escaped from mankind. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.